I'm only a high school grad, so this is all I can do. Cleaning bathrooms is a respectable job too, she said with a smile, but there were faint tears in her eyes. It's absurd to say that because she's a high school graduate, she should clean toilets. I never imagined that I'd encounter such a situation immediately after returning from a secondment after 10 years. But this was just the tip of the iceberg. High school grads are easily replaceable. They just need to be obedient and go by the orders. Kevin, an executive, declared as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I felt a surge of anger, but it wasn't yet the time to act. I clenched my fists and bided my time, but then, Matthew is not to blame. Then neither am I. Caught off guard by this turn of events, I was wide-eyed. My name is Matthew Carter. At 39, I was ordered to a subsidiary, and after 10 years, I was instructed to return. Now nearly 50, I have no family of my own. My mother has already passed away from illness, and my grandparents died 2 years ago. My father exists, but he probably doesn't recognize me. I grew up in a slightly unusual environment. 10 years ago, my secondment to the subsidiary was more about removing an inconvenience than providing an honorable assignment. At the time, the former CEO, Mr. Morton, had fallen ill, and it was clear he couldn't return to the field. A fierce succession battle ensued between his eldest and second sons. The eldest, Derek, was the most likely successor. Not only because of his title as the eldest but also because of his work ethic and character, no one seemed a better fit than him. He treated everyone equally and made fair decisions. That was the kind of man Derek was. I was favored by him, and from my point of view, Derek was more suitable to be CEO than the frivolous younger brother. Yet somehow, the presidency went to the younger brother, Keith. I promise I'll be back soon. Hang in there until then. With those words, Derek suddenly disappeared. We who were left felt anxious. Because unlike Derek, Keith was arrogant and excelled at looking down on people. Whenever he opened his mouth, it was about educational background or pedigree, completely disregarding actual competence. After Derek left, as the new CEO, Keith did something outrageous. Anyone who sided with my brother might threaten my position. Everyone who has been against me must leave the main office. To strengthen his faction, he started ordering unreasonable relocations and secondments to get rid of those who were loyal to Derek. Being favored by Derek, I too was included in that list. Officially, it was a dispatch for staff training at a subsidiary, but in reality, it was probably in order to get rid of those who were Derek's side. But then, after 10 years, I was suddenly instructed to return. What could have prompted this change? I had a bad feeling and had no idea what was going on, but I couldn't refuse the command to return. Thus, I returned to the head office after 10 years. Due to the sudden order, the only apartment I could rent was a cheap one, more than a 30-minute walk from the station. Having lived in the countryside for 10 years, I was struck anew by the high cost of living in New York. Even renting a simple studio apartment in a decent area would have cost no less than $2,000. But there was a slight excitement in returning to New York after such a long time. During my secondment at the subsidiary, I was so busy that I hardly had time to sleep, and before I knew it, I was a 49-year-old bachelor without a girlfriend. There was a time when I thought it would be good to settle down, but at this age, who would want to marry me? Except for someone with peculiar tastes. Of course, concerned friends tried to set me up with younger women, but I turned them all down. I was a man who had dedicated everything to his job, capable of caring for subordinates, colleagues, and juniors. But I wasn't sure I could do the same for a wife. With both my mother and grandparents gone, there was no one left who genuinely worried about my future. I thought it might be best to dedicate my life to my work. In addition to that, I've also planned something else. I'll put that plan into action once everything is settled, I thought as I opened the office door for the first time in a long while. At first, all eyes were briefly on me, but everyone soon returned to their own tasks. As I walked to my desk, which I heard was near the window, a woman sitting alone next to my desk caught my eye. She appeared to be in her early 30s, and the only thing on her desk was a desktop computer with a black screen. She wasn't fiddling with her phone or using the computer, she was just sitting there. Nobody seemed to complain or give her any directions, even though she was doing nothing, and everyone else just went about their tasks routinely. I felt something odd here. It looked like everyone was working normally, but there was no consistency. Perhaps because tasks were being distributed haphazardly everywhere, everyone seemed to be rushing around. I had never seen such a scene before, so it naturally caused my brow to furrow. I decided to observe the overall office environment while carrying out the tasks assigned to me. Then her boss, Tyler, came over and gave her some instructions. Once he left, she stood up and headed somewhere, piquing my interest, so I slowly got up from my seat as well. Leaving the office and turning right, there was a storage closet. She took out a full set of cleaning supplies from there, set up a restroom closed for cleaning sign, and began to clean. This was indeed a surprise. I had checked to confirm, and it seemed that the cleaning was still outsourced as it had been in my time. A cleaning company that doesn't clean toilets? I had never heard of such a thing. If that was the case, then the restroom cleaning she was doing must be part of her assigned duties, since she wasn't seen doing any other work. It might be possible that she was made to clean as a punishment for some mistake she made before I arrived. Eager to find out, I waited there until she came out. When she came out hurriedly, possibly having forgotten something, our eyes met. "Ah, you were the one from earlier. Why are you doing this?" I asked sharply, cutting off her words. I cleared my throat and continued questioning. "The cleaning is supposed to be done by employees from an outsourced company. You haven't seemed to be doing any particular work, so is this some kind of punishment?" While I was speaking, a staff member in blue cleaning attire passed by us, cleaning every corner of the hallway. Despite that, why would an employee like her need to clean toilets? As I pondered, she explained the situation. "Because I'm a high school graduate." "What? Why does your education come into this?" "They told me high school grads should only clean toilets." She laughed, but her eyes were moist, looking like she might cry at any moment. I sighed softly and immediately called Tyler. He soon arrived, looking down on us with disdain, and replied, "It's all directed by upper management, and we have no right to object." He clicked his tongue and left with heavy footsteps. "Who gave that order, do you know?" "Yes, it was an executive named Kevin." Hearing that name gave me a headache. Even after all these years, Kevin was still clinging to his position, now using it to harass employees with only a high school education. Nothing has changed. In fact, it's gotten worse. "What?" "Ah, nothing, just talking to myself." "We need to do something about this." After much thought, I decided to call Kevin and hear the reasons myself. "Who is calling me out? Who do you think you are?" "I came because it's audacious of you. Now, answer me." An hour later, a man in his mid-50s burst into the office, flinging the door open roughly, causing the employees to go pale. "Why is he?" I could barely hear someone whisper. Seeing Kevin's usual attitude and how much he was disliked, I involuntarily sighed. Kevin didn't miss that. "Ah, it was you. I suppose you're the only one here bold enough to act so impudently." Derek's lapdog. With that, Kevin smirked malevolently. Before I was assigned to the subsidiary, Kevin, who had once gotten into a heated argument with me, was still as arrogant as ever. He loved to look down on people and was known for his belief in the supremacy of academic credentials. He was the closest confidant of the current CEO, Keith, and held significant power within the company as a long-standing executive. In fact, Keith is more of a puppet CEO, with Kevin pulling the strings behind the scenes to manipulate things as he pleases. Kevin has always distinguished between employees with a high school diploma and those with a college degree, continuing to harass the former blatantly. Since I myself am a high school graduate, I was quickly targeted by Kevin, who would say, "You high school grads can just do these menial tasks," assigning me only minor assignments in the past. Now, with no one to obstruct him, Kevin seemed to be more unbridled than ever, his behavior accelerating. It was none other than Kevin who had ordered Hannah to clean the toilets. While we exchanged sparks, he glanced at Hannah next to me, slowly raising the corners of his mouth. "You have a pretty good face. That's why I've kept you around. You should be grateful that a high school grad like you even got picked up for mid-career recruitment at a major company like ours." He said this with a scornful laugh. Hannah looked down, holding back tears, her shoulders trembling. She had joined the company this April, so she was still a new employee, having been there for only about 6 months. Yet, the treatment she received was more than just pitiful. Isn't what you just said inappropriate for a company executive? I stated firmly, which seemed to sour Kevin's mood as he clicked his tongue. Do you even know why you were allowed to return to the headquarters? Have you thought about that? Indeed, I had wondered about that myself, but hearing the truth left me speechless. It's to give you the axe. Since you were on secondment at the subsidiary, we couldn't fire you freely due to your employment contract there. So, we brought you back to find a reason to expel you from this industry the second you slip up. Thinking I was brought back only for such a reason boiled my blood. Kevin left the scene laughing uproariously, leaving a heavy atmosphere behind. Hannah apologized repeatedly, saying it was her fault that Kevin had targeted me, but it was certainly not her fault. This was my issue, a challenge I had to resolve myself. The next day, the office atmosphere was even more tense than before. I headed to my desk nonchalantly, where I locked eyes with someone sitting there. My cheeks twitched slightly, but I managed to hold back. Hey, you were pretty cheeky yesterday. It was Kevin, sneering as he spoke. He quickly stood up from his chair and shoved a stack of documents at me. From today, you just work on these. Don't do anything else. His tone was final as he walked away. Checking the documents, they were all tasks typically given to new employees. Despite this, the documents contained numerous tasks requiring me to move around various parts of the building. Moreover, there were instructions for cleaning entire floors scattered throughout, making me think that if there was time to create such tasks, surely there were more important things to be done. Then one of the employees approached me with an apologetic look. As you may have guessed, all the regular employees assigned here are high school grads. Tyler and the section chief Cody, as well as the division head Henry, are college grads, but they are all Kevin's cronies. No one dares to oppose them. With that, he left with a resigned look in his eyes. Then Hannah came over in exchange. I'm sorry. It's because of me that you got dragged into this. She was always concerned about others, and I wished she would think more of herself. But knowing I would apologize if I were in her position, I accepted Hannah's apology for now. I decided to spend the next month or so casually observing the company's dynamics while deflecting Kevin's harassment. As expected, the office was dominated by college grads, and high school employees were treated like disposable pawns or relegated to menial tasks. That's why they hire a certain number of high school grads every year. I heard it wasn't such a terrible company back in the day. It even makes lunch taste bad. Even during lunch breaks, high school grads had to endure feeling marginalized. As proof of this, there was an unspoken rule that high school grads couldn't use the employee cafeteria, forcing us all to eat silently at our desks. Today, since Tyler and Cody were out at a meeting, there was more chatter among the employees than usual. Hannah, sitting at the desk next to me, was unusually vocal about her frustrations as she ate her sandwich. Do you know about the company's past? Aren't you just 30? And you've only joined mid-career this fiscal year. Oh, well. My mom knew some of the senior management, and I heard about the company through her and joined. But it's been shocking to see all this in just half a year. She added, yes, I got the job through connections, and chuckled self-deprecatingly. Seeing her like this pained me, and I found myself muttering, protecting colleagues is a supervisor's duty, isn't it? Did you say something? No, nothing. I finished my now cold coffee and began preparing for the afternoon's tasks. Months quickly passed, and as the end of the year approached, the city seemed to slowly come alive. Amidst this, unsettling rumors swirled among the upper management, who appeared more tense than usual. Kevin's behavior was more tyrannical than ever, and defending employees from his outbursts consumed the entire day. The source of their anxiety was none other than the rumor that Derek, the eldest son, was returning. While the origin of the rumor was unclear, if true, it would be highly inconvenient for them. No wonder they were troubled. They had managed to expel Derek, but since then, his whereabouts and activities were unknown. The uncertainty was frightening. Moreover, it was obvious to everyone that Keith, who had ousted his brother using underhanded tactics, was less fit to be CEO. Rumors suggested that even Keith was so anxious that he had begun nervously biting his nails. The news of Derek's return was understandably unsettling. Did you hear? Derek is coming back. Yeah, I've heard. If he returns, I'm sure the company will be transformed. Do you know him? Only by reputation. Hannah responded with a smile. For high school graduates, Derek was a beacon of hope. He treated everyone with fairness and judged people based on their abilities, not their titles. In contrast, Keith focused only on academic credentials, completely ignoring an individual's suitability or potential. His commands were blatantly unfair. High school grads do this, college grads do that. Yet, everyone has their own lives to consider. Those with families couldn't afford to be unemployed on a whim, a fact exploited by Keith. If we set their salaries a little higher than elsewhere, they won't be able to leave even if they want to. Once they've tasted the sweet perks, they're trapped. It was a cruel tactic that effectively trapped many employees like insects in a spider's web, unable to move forward or back. Amidst this, Keith himself made a move. Suddenly, he burst through the office door, accompanied by Kevin and several other executives, and walked straight towards Hannah and me. As soon as he saw me, he flashed an unnerving smile. "It's been a while, hasn't it?" "Yes, it has. I intended to make your life difficult to fire you, but you managed to solve everything." "Fine. Let's do this the hard way." With that, Keith commanded our reassignment. "You're being relocated. You'll move to this remote island." Hearing the destination, Hannah's eyes widened. "Eh? That place, isn't it about to?" "You'll be sent to the island under a contract that absolves us of any responsibility for what happens there. We won't be liable for anything." It seemed they wanted to remove me before Derek's return. The branch on the island was scheduled for decommissioning soon, and the real meaning behind their words was that after its closure, we would be unemployed and the company would not help us. And Hannah, simply because she was near me, got caught in the crossfire. "This is too much." As Hannah was on the verge of tears, Keith leaned closer to her. "I've heard reports from Kevin, and you do have a decent face. How about it? Want to become my secretary?" The sudden offer left Hannah stunned. It wasn't clear what he meant, but Keith was not one to trust people easily. Thus, his words were a sweet temptation, a trap. Keith's method was never about saving her, it was about how to make her experience hell. Pretending to be kind and reaching out to Hannah, who had been targeted, only to ultimately cast her into hell. That was Keith's way. This was something I couldn't just stand by and watch. It would be one thing if I were the only one suffering. I still had an ace up my sleeve, something I hadn't revealed yet, something that could change the course of events. But Hannah was different. Because of me, she had caught the attention of Kevin and Keith. "Wait a moment." I intervened between Hannah and Keith, trying to stop what was about to happen, but before I could do more, Hannah shouted out, "Don't joke with me. Who would want to be your secretary?" She was stronger and more resolute than I had thought. Since meeting her, she had often belittled herself, claiming she was inadequate and had struggled with relationships in her previous job. I failed at my last company because of my issues. I was fed up with interpersonal problems and was about to quit when my mother recommended this place. Relying on that was a mistake. I should have made it on my own. "I'm just a coward who always depends on others," she said, biting her lip in frustration. She mustered her courage and stood up to Keith, the current CEO. Both I and the other employees were awestruck by her bravery. However, when Keith faced resistance, he shrugged dismissively. A pitiful woman, letting go of her chance. "Well, it's fine. The reason for your reassignment is because of this man. Blame him if you must," he said, pointing at me and laughing loudly. Then, one of the employees raised his hand. His voice echoed unnaturally loud in the silent office. "If Matthew is being reassigned, please let us go with him." At that moment, other employees stood up to agree with him. Hannah had been working closely with me recently, so this level of solidarity was somewhat expected. I had prepared to some extent to save her. But this was unexpected. I hurriedly spoke up. "Wait. There's no need for all of you to sacrifice yourselves. At least here, you're guaranteed a salary to support your families. Following me means likely being jobless by the end of the fiscal year. I can handle being alone, but you don't need to go this far." I tried to persuade them, but the employee who spoke first shook his head, rejecting my words. "No, we've discussed this and decided to follow you whatever happens. We'd rather start over than continue being treated like insects here. The sooner, the better. So, Keith, if you're sending Matthew away, please relocate all the high school grads from this department as well," he declared. The atmosphere turned bizarre, and Keith momentarily faltered. Yes, he was incapable of handling unexpected situations, that's why he wasn't fit to be CEO. Sensing Keith's discomfort, Kevin quickly intervened. "If you all want to rush into hell, we'll send you there sooner. After all, there are plenty of replacements for high school grads," he said. Hannah stepped forward. "A company that treats people this way will eventually destroy itself." "What did you say? How dare a high school grad speak to me like that?" It was at this moment that I finally realized. A dry smile escaped me. I thought it's better to minimize sacrifices, which is why I didn't say anything earlier, but this, troublesome colleagues, I said, drawing all eyes toward me. I took a deep breath and then spoke. "Leave the rest to me," as I moved to shield her with my back. After making eye contact with a surprised Hannah, I glared fiercely at Keith. Suddenly flustered, Keith began to shout, spitting as he spoke. What's with that look? How dare a high school grad like you glare at me?" As he backed away yelling, I sighed and said, "Keith, how long do you plan to linger around? You used despicable means to expel your brother and even deceived your father to build your fortress. Well, that man wasn't fit to be the CEO of the company anyway. How long do you intend to keep this up?" At my words, not only Hannah and the employees but also Keith and the other executives looked utterly baffled. It was time. Thinking this, I handed Keith a document. "What is this?" "This contains everything about me and my mother's family tree. Even someone like you, who's always hiding behind Kevin, should be able to understand what this means." Keith, infuriated by my insolence but intrigued by the document, silently read through it. The next moment, his hands trembled and the paper fell to the floor. Kevin picked it up with a puzzled look and read it, suddenly exclaiming in shock. "What does this mean? You were the former CEO's second son." Pointing at me, Kevin asked with a trembling voice. Since everyone seemed completely lost, I decided to explain my background and why I was standing here. As Kevin mentioned, I am indeed the second son of the former CEO. Some might assume that Keith is the one, but in truth, Keith is the third son. Yes, he's my younger brother. My father was married twice, and the current lady is his second wife. Both my older brother Derek and I are sons of the first wife, while Keith is the only child of the second wife. My parents divorced before I was born. Originally, the company was founded by my mother and her family, but my father married her under false pretenses to benefit from it. After giving birth to my older brother, the first child and eldest son, my father's attitude changed drastically. Seeing how he treated employees like objects, my mother protested, and it escalated to their separation. My father took all the wealth and fame the Carter family had built. My grandparents decided to cut ties with the company to prioritize their daughter's peace. At that time, my mother was pregnant with me, but it was only realized after the divorce, so naturally, my father did not know of my existence. He knows nothing of my birth, so it is only natural that Keith and his close associate Kevin were unaware. For my father, what his ex-wife does or whether she has children was irrelevant. That's why Keith and Kevin never bothered to check about the former wife either. However, decades later, they realized this oversight was a miscalculation. They never imagined that I would stand as a significant obstacle. I was raised in my mother's family home, the Carter family, and one day, I learned my true identity. I came to see you secretly. I heard from Mom that I have a younger brother. A man suddenly appeared and introduced himself as my brother. Yes, meeting Derek changed the course of my life. Hearing about our mother's plight made me want to rectify their grievances, and I decided to join the company. If they treated high school grads like pawns, the better the qualifications, the higher the hiring rate. So I graduated from a prestigious high school and joined this company. Eventually, my brother disappeared suddenly, and all employees loyal to his faction were ousted from the headquarters. But when I discovered that it was all my brother's strategy, I was shaken. I want to realize the ideals that Mom and my brother envisioned. Just for that, I've been moving quietly under the radar for these past 10 years. No, even before that. Saying this, I forcefully placed the investigative report detailing the misconduct of Kevin and other executive officers, including Keith, on the table. I know enough about you all. This company is not a place for you. It's a precious company that my mother's family built. Whether it's my brother or my father, I won't show any mercy. Upon hearing this, Keith turned pale and fled, while Kevin, flustered, shouted Keith, and chased after him in a panic. The other executives left the room with embarrassed looks, leaving only Hannah, myself, and the remaining employees. Someone started to clap quietly. Then, the applause spread contagiously, eventually engulfing the entire floor. Matthew, thank you. Hannah expressed her gratitude. Other high school grad employees also voiced their thanks. It was actually a gamble. Honestly, we would have been in trouble if we had really been sent away. But, we believed in you. We believed that you definitely had a plan to overturn everything. We're so glad. Relieved, the other employees also sighed heavily. It's okay, it's okay. I haven't done anything special. I just took action to protect what needed to be protected. I just did what was obvious. Hannah laughed heartily, tears glistening in her eye. Didn't know you could laugh like that. I was just so happy, it just came out. Was it strange? Not at all. Now, this was where the real challenge began. There was still a mountain of work to be done, everything was far from over. This point was both a goal and a starting line. Later, Keith and Kevin were arrested on charges of embezzlement and various other crimes. Executives involved were prosecuted in a domino effect, and the company briefly plunged into chaos. Among the first to act were the high school graduate employees, who had been looked down upon until then. Due to being pushed into various menial tasks, they had naturally picked up on how to maneuver cleverly. It was Hannah and other high school graduates who unified the company, which had become a leaderless mob. The college graduates, ashamed of their past conduct, cooperated to prevent the company from falling further. They managed to hold on until a new leader was decided. Of course, my brother Derek became the top executive. You've all done well. Thank you, I appreciate it. Leave the rest to me. After that, my brother quickly reorganized the entire company and managed to turn things around. Despite the embezzlement scandal, numerous companies wanted to do business with us, and we avoided going into the red. All this was thanks to the efforts my brother had made over the past decade. At the same time, I decided to leave the company. Aren't you going to stay in the limelight? On the day I decided to leave, Hannah was there. Watching her, I slowly formed my words. Uncovering Keith's fraud was actually my brother's doing. I don't have the know-how for management. And my brother has earned more renown than anyone. There's no stage for me when he's around. I was merely following his orders. I said, smiling. Hannah's tears began to flow. Don't say that. Derek is indeed wonderful. He has the sense and charisma of a CEO. And the atmosphere in the company improved quickly after his return. But the one who truly saved us was undoubtedly you, Matthew. Hearing this, I had no words to return, merely lifting the corners of my mouth slightly. My brother excelled. That was a given. He had once lost the succession battle, pretending to step down, while quietly gathering allies and companies sympathetic to him underground. It took more time than expected, 10 years, but as my brother returned to power, the company regained its former glory. My brother left the company because he felt he had no means to counter our father or brother at that time. Both my brother and I are sons of the first wife, and Keith was the darling son of the current wife. It wasn't just a change, it was preparation. Retreating was also part of the plan. Well, my brother is incredible. I plan to take a break from society and travel the world. As I turned to leave, Hannah suddenly hugged me tightly. I'll be waiting. I'll always wait for your return. I couldn't fully understand the meaning of her words. But I understood there were people and a place waiting for me. It might be about a year? Yes, I understand. But would you allow me to wait? How could I refuse such a request? Cherish your encounters. Don't worry about me for now. Understanding my words, Hannah slowly nodded and responded. After a while, I found myself on a small Pacific island. Reading a charmingly written letter in cute, round script while basking in the sea breeze. Instead of modern emails or messages, I opted for old-fashioned correspondence during my travels, making the prospect of returning to the US all the more exciting.